You know the person I mean, late 70s, still traveling, still working in the garden most mornings, still gets down on the floor to play with the grandkids, and gets back up without thinking twice about it. And you know the other person too. Same age, almost to the year, struggles to stand from a chair, takes the elevator even for one flight, has quietly stopped leaving the house as often because ordinary errands have started to feel like work. Here's the part that surprised me when I started digging into the research for this video. The gap between those two people almost never opens up at 80. It opens years earlier, in a set of small, unremarkable choices that neither of them was paying attention to at the time. I went through the recommendations from the major aging research organizations to find out what those choices actually are. 8 kept showing up again and again across completely different studies. Some of them you've probably guessed already. One of them I hadn't seen coming, and by the time you get there, I think you'll understand why it's the one every other habit on this list depends on. Stick around for that one. It changes how the first 7 actually work. I'm Mike Anderson, and this is Inside Health. If you're tired of miracle cures and headlines designed to scare you into clicking, you're in the right place. Every video here starts with the actual research, not the headline version of it. Healthy aging was never about doing everything perfectly. It's about the handful of ordinary things that, done consistently, decide how the next 20 years go. Here's what nobody tells you about aging. The research exists, but almost no one reads it. I have. And what's in the next few minutes could change how you think about the next 20 years of your life. If that's useful to you, the subscribe button is right there, and it genuinely helps a channel like this keep going. Let's start with the one almost everyone gets wrong the moment they retire. Here's something nobody mentions on the way into retirement. The day is going to feel like nothing but good news. In a very specific physical sense, that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Think about everything your body used to do without being asked. The walk to catch the elevator before it closed. Standing at the counter making coffee before anyone else was up. Taking the stairs because waiting for the elevator felt like a waste of 30 seconds. None of it felt like exercise. It was just Tuesday. Retire, and all of it can vanish inside a single week. Not because you decided to stop moving, but because nothing is requiring it of you anymore. Give it 10 years, and the result becomes visible. A walk around the block that suddenly feels longer than it should. A door you used to push open one-handed, now needing both. The easy explanation, at that point, is genetics. And genetics do matter. Nobody's pretending otherwise. But here's what actually caught me off guard digging into the research. It's not what changed in your body over that decade. It's what disappeared from your days. And there's a specific, measurable reason that gap matters more than most people realize. That coffee counter stand, that extra flight of stairs, that sprint to catch the elevator. Researchers actually have a name for all of it. NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. The calories and effort your body spends on everything that isn't a workout. It's a real, measured category, and for most working adults it makes up a surprising share of daily activity. One that can quietly vanish almost entirely the moment a commute and a schedule disappear with it. Nothing changes at first. That's the trap. There's no single bad day to point to. Just eventually, a countertop you find yourself leaning on without thinking about why. The easy thing to tell yourself is, that's just what getting older feels like. But the research says something more useful. Regular movement, not intense workouts, just movement, is tied to better balance, fewer falls, and better heart and brain health well into your 80s. A morning walk, gardening, taking the stairs when it's comfortable, standing up and stretching after sitting a while. None of it needs a gym membership. Every one of these is your body getting the same message on repeat. You're still needed here, and your body takes that message seriously. Here's a real question, not a rhetorical one. What's the thing that actually gets you moving most days? Not what you think you should be doing. What you actually do. Drop it below. Movement keeps the engine running. But there's something your body starts quietly taking back after 70 that walking alone can't stop. And it's the exact thing standing between you and catching yourself the next time you stumble. I'm just weaker because I'm older. You've probably said some version of that yourself. It's half true. Here's the half that usually gets left out. Muscle loss after a certain age isn't like getting gray hair. A cosmetic change you notice and move on from. It's functional. It shows up first in the exact moments you need strength most. Getting off the floor, carrying groceries in one trip, catching a door before it swings shut on you. The genuinely good news, and this is the part that gets buried. Muscle responds to being challenged at almost any age. 70, 80. The tissue itself doesn't know how old you are. It only knows whether it's being asked to do anything. Forget the image of a gym for a second. Think of muscle more like a bank account you make small deposits into. Resistance bands twice a week. Chair squats holding onto a counter. Stairs when they're comfortable. Carrying the groceries instead of routing around them. Skip the deposits long enough, and life starts making withdrawals you can't easily undo. Here's a detail most fitness advice never mentions, and it changes how you should actually train. Strength. How much force you can produce is only half the picture. The other half is muscle power. How quickly you can produce that force. Research on aging has found that power fades faster than raw strength does, and several studies have found it a better predictor of real falls than strength alone. It makes sense once you think about it. A stumble doesn't give you several seconds to react. It gives you a fraction of one. The practical difference is mostly about tempo, not equipment. A slow, controlled chair squat builds strength. The same movement, controlled on the way down, a bit quicker and more deliberate on the way up, starts training power specifically. Same exercise, different intent, and it's the version actually built for the moment you need it most, catching yourself. This is the habit underneath almost every other one on this list. Strength is what lets you get up off the floor after playing with a grandchild. It's what catches you the half second you trip on an uneven sidewalk. Lose it, and you don't just lose lifting capacity. You lose the margin for error that independence actually runs on. Quick poll, one letter is all it takes. Comment A if you've already got some version of this in your routine. Bands, chair squats, stairs on purpose. Comment B if it's still sitting on your someday list. I'm genuinely curious which one wins. And if you've got a condition your doctor should weigh in on first, that conversation comes before any of this. You can move every day. You can build strength on purpose. And none of it holds if your body isn't getting the raw material to actually use it. That's next. And it involves a sense most people don't realize gets quieter with age. Picture building a wall where every night somebody pulls 2 bricks back out. You could work at that wall forever and it would never get taller. That's roughly what happens when muscle isn't getting enough protein to rebuild with. And here's the part that catches people off guard. It's rarely about eating less. Researchers have a specific name for what's actually going on: anabolic resistance. In plain terms, aging muscle needs more protein at a sitting than younger muscle does to trigger the same amount of repair. So a meal that was plenty at 45 can quietly underdeliver at 75, even though nothing about the plate has changed. I eat the same way I always have is true for a lot of people past 70. The problem is the same meals that used to be plenty now leave a gap most people never notice, because nothing about eating the same feels like it should be the issue. Eggs at breakfast, Greek yogurt as a snack, fish, chicken, beans, lentils, tofu through the week. None of it needs to be complicated or expensive. It just needs to show up at more meals than it currently does. And there's a second gap hiding right next to it, one that has nothing to do with food. Your thirst mechanism gets quieter with age. Not gone, quieter. The brain centers that detect when your blood is becoming more concentrated, which is what actually triggers "I'm thirsty," get measurably less sensitive over time. The body still needs the water. It just stops asking for it as clearly, which means the body can already be running low before the "I should drink something" signal ever fires. Mild dehydration doesn't announce itself. It just shows up as tired, foggy, a little unsteady on your feet, and gets blamed on everything except the actual cause. A water bottle within reach. A few sips between meals instead of waiting to feel thirsty. Small, almost boring habits, and they add up to more than most people expect. If this is landing for you, tap like before you keep watching. It's the single biggest signal that tells YouTube to put research-based content like this in front of more people, and it costs you nothing. So far, everything we've covered protects the body, but there's a part of you that doesn't show up on a bathroom scale or a blood panel at all, and most people are training it completely wrong. Ask most people how to keep the brain sharp after 70, and you'll get the same answer almost every time. Crossword puzzles. Nothing wrong with a crossword. But here's what the research on cognitive aging actually points to instead. Your brain isn't looking for repetition. It's looking for something it hasn't done before. Think about the last time you genuinely learned something new. Your grandchild walking you through an app, finally figuring out a video call on your own, picking up a camera or a paintbrush or a recipe you'd never have attempted 10 years ago. It probably felt clumsy at first, maybe even a little embarrassing. There's a good chance some part of you thought, I'm too old for this. Flip that thought around for a second. That awkwardness isn't evidence you're falling behind. It's what it feels like when your brain is actually working, forming new connections instead of running the same familiar groove one more time. Researchers studying this have a name for the buffer it seems to build over time: cognitive reserve. The idea, roughly, is that a brain that's kept working on genuinely new material builds up a kind of capacity that helps it keep functioning well, even as some age-related change happens underneath the surface. It's not about any single puzzle or class. It's the accumulated effect of regularly asking your brain to do something it hasn't fully mastered yet. You don't need to become an expert at anything. A book on a subject you've never explored, a handful of words in another language, a beginner's class in something you've always been curious about. Ask a grandchild to teach you something they love. They will astonish you with how seriously they take the role of teacher. None of it is about the specific skill. It's about the message. We're still growing here. Retirement doesn't have to close that door. For a lot of people, it's the first time in decades that door's actually open. Tell me the most recent, I'm too old for this moment that turned out fine anyway. A recipe, an app, a hobby, anything. I'll bet the comments on this one are more entertaining than usual. Movement, strength, fuel, a curious mind, all four matter. But there's a fifth thing that studies keep linking to nearly all of the others, and it rarely gets mentioned in the same breath as health at all. Ask someone what matters for healthy aging, and you'll hear blood pressure, cholesterol, joints, maybe diabetes. Almost nobody says, who you talked to this week. Let's be clear about something first. Being alone and being lonely aren't the same thing. Plenty of people spend real time by themselves and feel completely fine about it. The concern isn't solitude. It's when weeks quietly go by without a real conversation, without anyone's voice on the other end of a call, without feeling like anyone would notice if you disappeared for a few days. Long-term isolation has been tied, across a wide body of research, to higher rates of depression, heart disease, and cognitive decline, serious enough that the World Health Organization actively encourages older adults to stay connected wherever they can. Here's the number that stopped me when I first read it. A large, widely cited analysis led by researcher Julianne Holt-Lundstad found that weak social ties carried a size of mortality risk in the same range as smoking roughly 15 cigarettes a day, larger in that analysis than the risk tied to inactivity or obesity. Some researchers have since urged caution about leaning on that comparison too literally, since the two risks work through very different mechanisms. But even with that caution built in, the core finding, that connection has a real, measurable relationship with how long and how well people live, has held up across a lot of follow-up research since. Here's the reassuring part. This isn't about needing a big social circle. One phone call, one cup of coffee with someone, one short conversation after church, or the store, or a walk around the block. That's genuinely enough to matter, and it does something beyond the moment itself. It gives you a reason to look forward to tomorrow. People with something to look forward to tend to take the walk, cook the real meal, keep the appointment. Connection doesn't just feel good, it quietly pulls every other habit on this list along behind it. If there's someone you've been meaning to call, this might be your sign. There's a real chance they need that call as much as you do. If a specific person came to mind while I was talking just now, a parent, an old friend, someone you've been meaning to reach out to, send them this video instead of the message you've been putting off. Let the video be the excuse to finally call. Movement, strength, nutrition, curiosity, connection. Every one of them takes energy you don't get from anywhere else, and the one place you actually generate it is somewhere you're not even conscious for. You already know the feeling. One bad night's sleep, and everything the next day takes more effort than it should. Patience runs thin. Even deciding what to eat feels like a decision you don't have the bandwidth for. Now stretch that across months instead of one night. It's tempting to write that off as simply what aging feels like. Sleep researchers push back on that pretty firmly. Sleep patterns do shift with age, but chronically poor sleep isn't something to just accept as the new normal. Here's what's actually happening while you're out: muscle repair, memory consolidation, immune system maintenance. Sleep isn't downtime. It's the one stretch of the day your body gets to focus entirely on fixing what the day wore down. One discovery from the last decade or so is worth knowing specifically. The brain has its own drainage system, which researchers call the glymphatic system, and it does most of its work during the deepest stage of sleep, the stage that shrinks the most as we age. That system flushes out metabolic waste the brain accumulates during the day, including proteins that have been linked to Alzheimer's disease. This is still an active area of research, and scientists are still working out exactly how large the effect is. But the direction of the finding has shown up consistently enough that sleep researchers now talk about deep sleep as something closer to brain maintenance than simple rest. A few ordinary things get in the way without most people connecting the dots. An inconsistent bedtime, caffeine later than it feels like it should matter, a heavy meal too close to lights out, a screen an arm's length from your face at 11 at night. None of those ruin a night on their own. Stacked together, night after night, they make it harder for your body to settle into the kind of sleep that actually restores anything. The fix isn't complicated, and it isn't about chasing 8 perfect hours every single night. That's not a realistic bar for anyone. It's consistency, roughly the same bedtime and wake time, some morning daylight if you can get it, staying active during the day, and a wind-down routine that actually signals to your body that the day is ending. One good night feels nice. 300 of them, strung together over years, is what actually changes how you feel and function. This is the kind of thing you mean to act on, and then forget by tomorrow morning. Hit save on this video now before you close the app, not to watch again, just so it's sitting in your saved list the next time you're deciding whether tonight's a late screen night or an early lights out night. Here's something that unsettled me a little while researching this next part. You can do everything right: move, eat well, sleep well, and still miss a problem developing quietly simply because it never bothers to hurt. Quick, honest question. When's the last time you saw a doctor while feeling completely fine? For most people, it's been a while. Which makes sense. If nothing hurts, nothing feels urgent. Here's the problem with that logic. Several of the most common conditions after 70, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, vision and hearing changes, some heart conditions, develop slowly enough that feeling fine and developing a problem can be true at the same time, for years. Nobody inspects a roof because it's leaking. You check it before it leaks, because that's the point where fixing it is still simple. Health checkups work exactly the same way. Not because something's assumed to be wrong, but because most things are far easier to manage caught early than caught late. What gets checked, and how often, genuinely depends on your history and your risk factors. Blood pressure, vision, hearing, vaccinations, whatever your own doctor thinks is relevant to you specifically. There's no one-size answer here, which is exactly why the conversation matters more than any generic checklist I could hand you. One specific thing worth asking for by name: a medication review against the Beers criteria, a list maintained by the American Geriatric Society of Medications that carry disproportionate risk specifically for people over 65, not because the drugs are bad, but because an older body can process some of them differently than a younger one. Most people are on medications that are completely appropriate for them. Asking about this specifically, rather than a general "any concerns," tends to get a much more thorough answer. The goal was never to spend more time in waiting rooms. It's the opposite: catching the small, boring things early so you spend more time doing the things that actually matter to you. If it's genuinely been a while since your last checkup, I'm not going to lecture you about it. Just answer this one to yourself, not to me. Is it actually going on the calendar this week, or back on the someday pile? That's the whole ask. Nothing to type, nothing to post. Movement, strength, fuel, curiosity, connection, sleep. Paying attention before something hurts. 7 real habits, each one backed by real research. But there's a reason I told you at the very start to stay for the last one. It isn't habit 9 on a list of 8. It's the thing that decides whether you actually do the other 7, or just mean to. Close your eyes for a second and picture tomorrow morning. The moment you wake up, what's actually waiting for you? A walk with the dog, breakfast with someone you love, checking on something growing in the garden, coffee with a friend, a grandchild who wants a story read to them one more time. Now the harder question, what's genuinely pulling you out of bed? Not obligation, but something you actually want to be awake for. That question turned out to matter more than I expected going into this. People with a clear sense of purpose tend to stay meaningfully more engaged with everything we've already talked about tonight. Not because purpose adds years by itself. It isn't magic, and it's not a substitute for the checkup we just talked about. But it seems to be the thing that makes the other 7 habits worth the effort in the first place. Here's the specific study that changed how seriously I take this. Researchers at Rush University tracked hundreds of older adults for years as part of the Rush Memory and Aging Project, measuring their sense of purpose alongside detailed cognitive testing. People who scored high on purpose were substantially less likely to develop Alzheimer's over the following years, more than double the difference in risk between the highest and lowest scoring groups. Then, in a follow-up analysis using brain autopsies from participants who had passed away, they found something that genuinely surprised the researchers. People with higher purpose showed better cognitive function than you'd expect given how much disease pathology, the actual plaques and tangles, was found in their brains. As if purpose helped some people's thinking hold up even while the same physical disease markers were present. The exact biological reason is still being studied, but the pattern itself has been remarkably consistent. Because here's the honest truth about willpower. It's a thin resource, and it runs out fast when the only reason to do something is, I'm supposed to. But give someone an actual reason. A grandchild, a garden, a neighbor who counts on them, a skill they're still building. And the walk stops needing willpower at all. It just becomes what you do on the way to something you care about. Purpose doesn't have to be dramatic. For some people, it's never missing a birthday. For others, it's a garden, or a neighbor who needs a hand, or finally teaching someone the thing you spent a career getting good at. None of it needs to be extraordinary. It just needs to matter to you, specifically. This is why it's the one habit that makes every other one on this list easier to keep, including all 7 we've already talked about tonight, because growing older was never really the ending people treat it as. It's a different chapter, running on different rules, where curiosity counts more than speed, and who you spend time with counts more than what you've accumulated. One word CTA. One word right now in the comments. What's the actual reason you get up in the morning? Not the polished answer, the real one. A name, a place, a project. One word is enough. I want to see what this comment section looks like by tomorrow. If a channel that treats you like an adult, without the hype, is worth having in your subscriptions, this is genuinely the best moment to do it. Right after the habit that ties the other 7 together, not before it. So that's the list. Move most days. Protect your strength on purpose. Feed your muscles and stay ahead of thirst. Keep learning something you haven't mastered yet. Stay genuinely connected to people. Protect real sleep, not just hours in bed. Get checked before anything hurts. And underneath all of it, hold on to a reason that's actually yours. None of this works because you do it once perfectly. It works because you do a version of it, imperfectly, for years, until it's just who you are without thinking about it. Don't try to fix all 8 this week. Pick one. A 10-minute walk tomorrow. A call to someone you've been meaning to reach. An extra egg at breakfast. That checkup you keep meaning to schedule. Small, unglamorous, repeated. That's the whole formula. It was never one dramatic decision. It's the years of quiet ones that add up to it. So here's my real question for you, and I mean it. Of the 8, which one is already solid for you? And which one genuinely surprised you tonight? Tell me both in the comments. I read every one I can get to, and more often than I expect, someone else's answer becomes exactly the push somebody else needed. If this was useful, the like button genuinely helps. And if you haven't already, subscribing means Inside Health keeps showing up in front of people who need it, not just the algorithm's favorites. And if a specific person crossed your mind at any point tonight, a parent, a friend, your own future self 20 years from now, send them this one. I'm Mike Anderson. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.